Welcome to 3. I'm Gill with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. The 2023 Australian Open draw is out, and we are very much ready to break it down. If you are just discovering us, new to the show in 2023, this is where to be. If you'd like a draw show that really only focuses on Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal, that is what we are going to do. However, we did not do a show after Djokovic's latest title to start the season in Adelaide 1, which was an ATP 500. And he had a good little run where he beat Shapovalov in the quarters, Medvedev in the semis, and Korda in the final. Joel, let's offer some quick thoughts on this final, where Korda had a match point, a chance to finish the match in straight sets. I guess from an evaluative perspective, do you feel like Novak showed some holes there or some concerns in his form, or was that just an awesome match by Korda, who kind of deserves all the credit for rising to Djokovic's level?
Korda was playing terrific. He was hitting the ball all sorts of places. He wasn't just absorbing and redirecting. He was absorbing and directing. I mean, some of his down the line forehands and backhands were magnificent. And he got a championship point, and Novak came to net on that point, and that's good. We came, and then Korda lobbed, and we know the Novak overhead, as great as he is, that's sometimes a shot that's you wonder about, but he had a fantastic inside out overhead winner and won the point, went on to turn around the match, but 6-4 in the third. I thought that's precisely tennis player logic. Novak, good. Look at me. I'm battle tested. See, this is good. And he won his 92nd career title. So all good on the Novak front on the tennis performance aspect.
Totally agree. Very impressed with Korda. Good close match that could have gone either way, but Djokovic was also, I thought, mostly himself. And overall, look, he's won 5 out of the last 6 events he's played. He's clearly been the best player in the world. So it was looking like perhaps we'd go into the Australian Open, an event he'd won 9 times, without any drama, I would say. There is one little wrinkle, and that is the hamstring that he, stretched out and got taped up in the Medvedev match. In the Korda match, it looked all right. There weren't any real incidents, and I couldn't see if he had strapping. But then yesterday, he cut off his practice with Daniil Medvedev, coincidentally enough, just about 40 minutes in after they played one set, and said, I just wanted to be precautionary because it is the week before the Australian Open. Amy, what do you make of this whole hamstring thing right now?
I saw the injury in the Medvedev match, and it's funny. I was taking notes on the match, and I saw him, and even in the previous match, I saw him do his Gumby stretching, and I was making note of that. Like he is in really good shape. He's in fine form. He's stretching as he always does, doing these incredible gets. And it was a stretch. It wasn't like one of those full out Gumby stretches, but it was a stretch that he just turned his hip funny and did suffer the hamstring pull, and saw the trainer, and then he was fine. And then he was okay in the final. I mean, one could argue that it might have been an easier match for him if he had been 100%. Yeah. But I'm sure that he can manage it. I mean, just kind of bad luck, I guess. He parted ways with his longtime physio, Uli, and he's got a new physio in there. So that's just sort of bad timing. But hopefully he'll be fine, and he's pretty good about managing these sorts of niggling injuries.
Great call on Uli. I had forgotten about that by the time the season began, and now he is dealing with a real health concern. Although we've looked, it'll be nothing compared to the 2021 injury, that's for sure. So yeah, I would back Djokovic to manage that in a positive way. He also did an interview, though, by the way, on the physical side of things. Before we get into the specifics of his draw, he's up 10, 15 pounds. So I think he's looked to build some muscle in the off season, which is, by the way, what most players do. And sometimes when you try to build strength, you do risk some injury. You do take on that risk. It's worth it, but it is a thing. 10, 15 pounds.
He plays really well lean. So you're right. Like, I don't know. Novak isn't he like the consummate tweaker to everything, all aspects of his life, his diet, the car he's driving, his sponsorship deals, his spiritual, he's all the technological, he's always just, tweaking things and trying new things. I mean, as well as he was playing last year, and he did look somewhat thin last year, but he was just lights out when he was able to play. So why would you, mess around with that? And he's a guy who I feel plays brilliantly when he is lean. So I hope that he'll be okay. And he manages this stuff so well. I think he probably will be.
Oh, he's just raised it to a whole quantitative level of performance evaluation. I mean, you see players before him who've done things, and he's making them look like they're like a ancient, kind of like a mainframe computer or something. I mean, he's just so organized about all these things. It's fascinating. I mean, we don't even know about the things with equipment and rackets and strings and temperature and grips and all sorts, and lead tape, all sorts of stuff. Just incredible.
Yeah, he didn't specify in the interview or give this away, but my guess is he just wants to continue to serve bigger and hit his forehand bigger. So he thinks a little bit of added weight might do him some good. So
like the lead tape of the body.
It is the lead tape of the body.
Lead tape.
Yeah.
Get a little more club head speed. So add more. So yeah, forget doing it with the racket. Let's do it with the body. I wonder. That's interesting. It's fast. I wonder how. Be interested to learn how professional tennis players go about doing that. I mean, that's not 3 pounds. That's significant.
Yeah.
He did say
with Novak, it's eating ice cream.
Yeah, but you lose it quickly. Novak was playing in the heat of Adelaide. He said he already dropped 3 kilos in Adelaide, so it's going right back down. How about last storyline for Novak? Actually, is just the mental aspect of returning to Melbourne, and just the baggage of what happened last year. Like, how does that? Do you think that changes kind of how Novak feels heading into this 2 weeks, Joel?
I think it's a slight aspect of that hunger and that desire and that part of any tennis player, any athlete. Well, let me show you guys something now that I'm back to regain it. And when he last left, remember the last time he played there, he was a champion. And then he last left there, he left Australia, obviously not on terms that he would have liked. But I think then it's kind of like, okay, Novak, okay, put that aside and regain rituals of tournament. I've won 9 times. And I'm going to add something about this slam of all of them and why it's the happy slam. Excuse me. There's no other slam where you can pretty much walk from where you stay to the venue. And not that Novak will, but it's a little bit like, imagine if for American audiences, is if the US Open was somewhere at the other end of Central Park. And there's something very nice. I've seen this with players, and I know from having been there a bunch of times, there's a really nice aspect of alignment between city, venue, restaurants, language, even these botanical gardens where Novak often would meditate. I've been to those gardens. So it's a very nice quality. It's kind of the best of urban, but spread out. I mean, Amy, we were there a few years ago, and it's got, so I think for Novak, it's got a nice tranquility mix. It's not, look, he's won all the slams, but it's not as remote. You're not going to get stuck in traffic. You're going to have some nice meals. A lot of nice, it's very lifestyle friendly. So I think Novak can just kind of lock those in, make reservations at certain restaurants, have certain foods. I don't know quite what I don't know if he has an Airbnb for the whole team or what his deal is. Either way, it's the easiest slam to perform well in.
Yeah, a lot of the players stay in that Crown area, right, on the Yarra River there, and you could conceivably just walk along the river to Melbourne Park. But I was really interested to hear his or see his quotes about the crowds. He is always so forthright, and he's been talking about his mental health and how it was hard mentally to recover from what he went through last year. And this is I love about Djokovic, to be so forthright about this kind of thing. But I was interested and surprised to read that he's paying attention to how the crowds receive him. And he was very happy to feel embraced in Adelaide, and they were chanting his name. And he like you, Joel, it was almost like a duplicate of the thing you said. He was like, let's see how they do in Melbourne. Let's see if it'll be the same. But, it could be or it might not be. So he's definitely, it's on his mind about how he's going to be received there. And as I've said, I do think that he will be well received.
I also think he'll be well received. I don't think Craig Tiley did him any favors by saying that you can't boo him, which is something that Channel 9 in Australia reported from a discussion with Tiley, and now that is a headline everywhere. I mean, tell me if you've stopped me if you've heard this before, but that is the absolute worst thing that they can possibly do. The worst way to get people to not boo is to tell them not to boo. I mean,
it's like here in the United States, studies have been done on how to get people to vote. And the best way to get people to vote is to tell them that they can't or try to take it away. And that gets them to the polls. Yeah, that's not good. But I think they're going to do what they want to do and what feels natural in the moment. And this guy's won this thing 9 times, as Joel said. I mean, ultimately, respect will be shown.
yes, I agree. I also think that if it's not, he will feel that, Amy, to your point. Like, I don't know. Sometimes people assume that he's just indestructible that way, and I don't think it's true. Just because of Wimbledon 2019 when he overcame it, I still think it affects him. Okay, let's talk about the players who he has in front of him. First round, which we love on this show, by the way. Let me explain something again for anybody who's new. While most shows are talking about the projected quarterfinals, we love the first round. Let's look at the first match. Roberto Carballes Baena. I think this is a great first round for Novak. Probably can't be better. I think a lot of top players would love to play RCB because he's so consistent. Allow me to be clear. This is a compliment. I mean, he barely misses, but he gives you a lot of rhythm. And you're just going to get a feel. Like, you're going to be able to play some rallies and dig your way into form. So I think it's very ideal for Novak. Does that make sense, Amy?
He's a clay court specialist, right? He's in a way, maybe with the hamstring, though, it's not quite ideal because I can see them getting in slightly longer rallies. But Novak is just such a far superior player that I still see as straight sets, fairly straightforward victory. And his scouting is really good, so he'll be able to figure out where to place the ball.
Well, ideal from a standpoint of an arduous effort against an opponent that's kind of a reliable kind of player. You're not playing someone who's going to slash unusual shots, hit unusual serves. You're just going to kind of dig in, bring your lunch pail, go to work. It's going to be on the remember, it's going to be on the big arena. It'll be on RLA. So that's going to be a factor for the underdog. It's, whoa, I'm playing the 9-time champ on his arena. And so I think with the underdog, I would be like, for example, I would want to say, tell you what, why'd you serve and volley on the first point?
Joel, not going to happen.
I know that. This is why people like that don't score upset wins. This is why they lose matches like this 4-3 and 4, because they've gotten this far. They won't innovate. They're going to do their thing, and then they'll blink. Because it's about ball tolerance. It's about ball direction, movement, balance. But there'll be a great many engaging rallies. If it's from Wimbledon, we'd say there'd be the moment when the guy is going to kind of crack a couple of winners down the line, come to net because the grass will help him. In this case, there'll be he'll grind out plenty of points, and he'll probably win 40% of them. Yeah.
Sounds about right to me. Uh, Looking at the next couple rounds, I mean, Dimitrov is the projected third round. He's the highest seed. He
Mhm.
plays Karatsev. There's a
Mhm.
couple of qualifiers in there, and we don't know who they are. There's Laszlo Gera, who just had a massive victory, biggest of his career, against Casper Ruud indoors in Auckland. There's Hugo Dellien in the next round, who is basically Roberto Carballes Baena, only he's a forehand. He's one of those clay quarters who isn't so much a grinder, but is kind of like a high racket speed forehand guy. But I mean, this is a very good eighth. Before we zoom out, I think the eighth is tremendous. And Dimitrov, I don't know what his state is right now, but in the last 6 months or so, that would suggest he's not even really reliable to make that third round match.
I think he has had an injury, Dimitrov. I think either Dimitrov or Karatsev would be the perfect matchup for Novak because it's scalable. We're getting up in experience and quality level. So I still think it'll be fairly straightforward, but it would almost be either one of those players would almost be like a good sparring match. But again, don't see a problem. I mean, I think the fans always like to comment, like, do you think Novak has a hard draw or an easy draw or whatever? I think his eighth is easier, but his quarter is trickier. So he's kind of got a mixed draw going here.
Well, right, as they pan out, that's right, because then it gets pretty thick because he's in the he's in that second yeah, that other half above it, at the top of it is a much thicker set of things with a possibility meeting. In his quarter could be Runa, it could be Kyrgios, it could be Rublev, Dan Evans, but one of those guys, and that could be interesting. Remember, and Runa, the only guy who's beaten him in that six tournament run. So that's the quarter I'd like to see. But again, you guys know most of how I feel about that kind of like a draw casting. You know, that's like a million years away.
Yeah. And the fourth round, just so that we cover all of our bases, will probably be either De Minaur or Pablo Carreño Busta. I'd be surprised if it were anybody else out of there. And you know, similar players. Novak has had two significant losses to PCB, but both of them have been Novak induced.
Yeah,
With
strange circumstances.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we're talking about the
Although,
Olympics.
yeah, the match that Novak was disqualified from, PCB was playing a good match. So you really don't know what would have happened.
If
Yeah.
these agreed, but these players stylistically are in kind of the Novak era. It reminds me of like the Cervali era, and there are great serve volleyers like, let's say, John Newcomb or Stan Smith, and there were others who weren't quite as good at it, and they did it well too. I mean, these guys, like, I don't see any among the people. Forget when if we get to Kyrgios or Runa, but ones like PCB or De Minaur, it's like, no, oh yeah, I know you. Haven't we practiced a few times? It's like, and I do that stuff better. Two-handed backhand, move the ball around, some reasonable serving. You know, there's anything about those opponents that's like scary to Novak and Dimitrov, who once upon a time held the possibility of something innovative and breakthrough, is kind of settled into what I think his deal is at this point. I mean, he's now 31, I believe. So 31 years old. So I think, no, okay. We've been around the campus a while, guys.
Yeah, well said. And by the way, I think Novak is playing so much better in 2022 and 2023 than he was in 2020. I just didn't like the way he was playing really in the second half of that year after the COVID break. So that might be another reason why PCB was. You're right, and you're right to point out he was right there with him. Demon's Aussie, by the way, so the crowd would be against Novak if that happened. Rod Laver Arena, probably at night.
Not again. No, I don't think they'd be against Novak. I think they'd be split for good tennis. I don't think what I like about, I've been in Australian crowds. Yeah, they'll be cheering their guy, but they won't be against Novak. They'll be looking. I mean, seriously, I won't see it like the way other venues or in other countries. I've been in that arena enough to see Australian fans got the champ 9 times, got the contender, who, by the way, hasn't proven himself yet big enough yet. It's all going to be a good show for all, because in a way, if you win, if you win a title in a place, let's just say 3 times or more, you're adopted. You have honorary citizenship to a degree. And so Novak, he's not an Aussie, but they've embraced him. I mean, when you win this thing 9 times, just as the British did with Roger, and the French and Rafa, that's a complicated one that we've discussed. But I think I think if he plays Alex, I think that's a crowd cheering quality tennis.
Okay.
Speaking of the Australian crowd, and this has nothing to do with our guys, but I have to throw it in there. I like the possibility of Kyrgios versus Rune in a night match. That could get really raucous. I wish I could just beam myself to Melbourne for that one, but Nick needs to come through, and so does Rune. And Nick is going to be the star of this Netflix documentary. It's a lot of distractions. He's at home. He's been injured too, so that's a big if that match happens.
I'm right there with you, Amy. Let's talk about that top 8 where the popular picks will be Kyrgios, Rune, Rublev, and that's really it. Those will be the popular picks.
They're the seeds in there. The other seed in there
Dan
is
Evans. Yeah, and Dan Evans, by the way, Andre Rublev is pissed to see him. Because that's a 4-4 head-to-head, and Evans, it's like a toss-up match every time. So Rublev does not want to see Dan Evans, but that's besides the point. We probably won't see Dan Evans in a quarterfinal. I think you're so right to point that out about Kyrgios, Amy. I mean, you have the Netflix thing coming out. It seems like a huge deal for him, and something that could kind of take his mind away from tennis. You have the fact that has not played a match ahead of this Australian Open because he has been injured. Has he been training? If he's too injured to play, is he too injured to train?
He did try to train again like he did last year, but he hurt himself training.
That's what I'm saying.
But
I'm saying while injured, has he been not training? And people might say, oh, Nick never trains. That's not true. That's not true. He worked hard last year, and that is what made the difference. And then the last thing is, has there ever been more pressure on him coming into a major in his entire career? This is not good in terms of the circumstances.
Is he playing doubles? Is he entered with Kakanakis?
No, he's decided to focus on singles.
Okay, that's smart. But it's a bummer because they were such a cool champs last year. Oh well. Yep. It's a lot. You're right, Gill. It's a lot on him.
All right, so we'll see. I think it's also a lot on Rune, by the way, who's a 19-year-old who is coming into a major for the first time with expectations, which is hard. And by the way, he hasn't won a match in a couple months now because he doesn't have a win under his belt this season. So I think there's challenges there. Like personally, I will throw out my prediction. You guys are free not to. I think it's going to be Andre Rublev, who's not the sexiest pick compared to Kyrgios and Rune, but I think that's who it's going to be in the quarters.
Oh, interesting. It's interesting. I had to do my picks for tennis.com this morning at the draw. And one of the things is to say which seed will disappoint. And I looked at him, I thought, Rublev, he's never brought his best at a major. He's got Kyrgios and Rune. You pointed out Evans. So I don't see him getting to that quarter. However, based on the things you said, the house of cards could topple, and here comes Rublev. Because one thing about Rublev, he hasn't brought his best at his slams, but he never brings his worst anywhere because there's a reliability to him that the other players you've mentioned, well, what are they going to be at? Are Rune and Kyrgios going to kind of destroy one another in whatever their match is if they meet?
Wants Rublev. This is a guy who's 0-6 in major quarterfinals because he hasn't been able to win matches like this one against Novak in a prospective quarterfinal. But people will also be mad at me probably if I don't point out that Rublev hasn't been good to start the year. He's 2 wins, 2 losses, a couple of eyebrow-raising losses, to be honest. So I mean, it's a very interesting 8th above Novak, but it's whoever, I don't know. There's arguments to be made for all 3 coming through. But yeah, we all have Novak advancing, I believe. So let's transition to Nadal now. Rafa, before we get into the draw. I mean, storylines with Nadal, and we actually did cover this last week, so we can kind of recap quickly if anybody missed the last episode. I think that we talked about his serve, and Amy, you noticed that it was down in his first two matches of 2023 at the United Cup, but overall there were other positives to take with his level. I think what I want to bring up now is he comes in 0-2 with, after a bad second half to 2022. Another kind of psychological question posed to you, Joel. I mean, what does that do to Nadal coming in? The fact that there's no momentum here.
Well, I think there are ways you can always look at it like, well, the last part of 2022, he was busy with a lot of other things going on in his life, and it's the end of the year, and now a new year starts, and the year starts with this a competition that's not exactly a tournament. So it's not quite the same as losing in the first round of two tournaments. However, if he'd won matches there, that would make him feel more positive. And so then I think you can engage in yet another form of tennis player logic, which is, all right, here it is, new start, play the next match. Just forget that stuff. Doesn't matter. And I'm the defending champ, and I'm going to play this guy. And I don't think Nadal even thinks I'm the defending champ. He just thinks, okay, I'm playing a tennis match tomorrow. I'm playing this left-hander Draper. That's it. That's my whole focus. And I think Nadal is about as laser focused as anyone who's ever played this sport. So I think that's all he's going to just put in his head right now and forget all that other stuff, that the external stuff that we all notice, the trends, the directions, the momentum, and just concentrate on this guy, on a formidable left-handed opponent.
Yeah. He's such a great problem solver and has been in this situation so many times. I always bring this up, but I did like a little mini study, how his clay court run up, all those tournaments in the clay court season. Did he have a bad clay court run up? Did he run the table where he won everything? Was he injured? It really didn't matter as to whether he won Roland Garros that year. He has limped in to Grand Slams so many times only to come out with the Grand Slam trophy. So he's not superstitious. He's not like, oh, I need to recreate the magic of last year. I agree with Joel. He'll go in, he'll say, this is the person in front of me. Boy, do I love competing and playing tennis matches. Here I go with my routines, and everything else. Here I go. The one thing I really, other than the serve, which I want to really look closely and see what he's doing with it, I'm really interested in his return position, as always. When he's away from clay, is he going to mix it up? Is he going to stand back? Does it depend on the opponent? But I really do think he'll be okay, and that the two losses are not going to impact him that heavily going into the tournament.
See, I think the thing in tennis that Nadal is better than this, I think, than anyone. It's the attitudinal part, like Amy, the problem solving, the attitudinal part. That's fine, and it appears, at least even through those losses last week, that the physical part is pretty okay. Well, no, actually, I'm wrong. You talked about it, Gill. You talked about his serving, right? And so you wondered if the ab was lingering. If the ab is lingering, if there's a physical part, because that's something you can't control. The attitudinal part you can control. The attitude can be controlled. Right. So you can discard past losses, which mean nothing, past wins, which mean nothing, past anything, which means nothing. Physical hindrance, now we're getting into some potential concerns.
Well, for me, item number one for Nadal is the serve. We all agree it's an important shot for him, and it hasn't been good. But item number two is the match toughness, which I know with Nadal is always kind of an assumed strength. But I don't think the 0-2 factor, or the fact that he's lost a lot of his recent matches, I don't think that comes into play until it's 5-all deuce. He's serving. It's the fourth set. And that's kind of where I think we have seen Nadal's recent form play a factor. Like last year, he was so incredibly match tough. He pulled off Houdini act after Houdini act after Houdini act. in terms of escaping from every tight situation. And I don't know. I feel like the lead up might hinder him in his attempts to just play his very best offensive, brave tennis in the really, really tight moments. So after the serve, that would be my number 2 concern for Nadal coming in. But I'm not concerned about the.
I have a concern about his confidence. He's a human being, and when I say confidence, I mean just like super, super zoomed out, the meaning of life, because he said goodbye to Roger Federer, and that had to have affected him as a human being. Seeing his close friend and rival's career come to an end and being so intimately involved in that goodbye. And that had to have affected him. I mean, he knows it's coming for him. And also having a child is a big deal. And there was a picture of the baby with Rafa holding the baby. It's so cute and sweet. But these big life changes may have, in the latter part of the season, kind of shaken him a little bit. And so I want to see that really focused competitor back in Rafa. Can we talk about the draw, Gil?
Yeah.
Because
let's go to it.
I'm just so bummed. Like, I didn't want Rafa to play Medvedev in the quarterfinals, but he's got Medvedev and he's got Tiafoe in his quarter, who he lost to at the US Open.
Well,
Yeah,
Tiafoe could
but
be the
let's not.
16th.
Yeah, I know. You guys like to talk micro because we're going to be doing more shows. But I do like to look at quarters, like
No,
who's
but
in the quarter.
I agree, but I like to look at it too. But I think that's more important for like Novak, who we don't see losing to Roberto Carballes Baena. Nadal has
Yeah.
Jack Draper in front of him. It's a top 30 player right now.
Yeah.
And that's not in the rankings, by the way. He's unseeded. But I think in reality, Jack Draper, after that offseason, a young player who keeps getting better and better, probably a top 30 player. This is different from the US Open, where Nadal was injured and then he lost to Borna Coric. And anybody who remembers what I said, and you guys might have said it as well. Look, Nadal can work his way into form. He plays Rinky Hijikata in the first round. He's not going to lose, even if he is at 70%. This is not Rinky Hijikata. This is Jack Draper. So this is not ideal for Rafa situationally.
Well, from a Rafa fan standpoint, it's not ideal. It's concerning because it's like, wow, this is going to be a tough start. And I remember I was looking at 2 of his toughest matches were against his fellow lefty Verdasco, who beat him in the first round here in 2016. And then they had a great semi in 2009. And so then Rafa, a tough player who's also a lefty. So that's a little problem solving for Rafa too. It's like another layer of problem solving from the external view, from the fan view, from the I want Rafa to go further view. From the Rafa view, yeah, this is where his mental power, and if it's a superpower, it's going to need to be applied a lot, is okay, here I am. I'm in Melbourne Park. I have the same, probably, I can only imagine the ritual he has in preparing, eating, walking, practice, all the little steps around these tournaments. And these tournaments, I can't do enough to take people inside what this tournament world is like, this kind of bubble that each of these tournaments is like, that in its own odd way is kind of a world-class version of a junior tournament. It's just inside the tennis bubble. And Rafa Nadal is going to put himself into that with his team. And it's going to, my only thing I need to do today is prepare to play a tennis match. And you're right. And then do it that way. And all the other stuff, I remember Pete Sampras used the word to me once. He says, oh, yeah, you guys, you have your, that's all commentary. And that's what we do. But it's kind of, I think from the Nadal standpoint, he would, like, if someone asked Rafa, do you think it's ideal that you're playing a guy who's playing as well? You know what he would say. He said, I just got to play this guy. Right.
Right. Well, Brandon Nakashima, by the way, tactically, I do want to say, I think Nadal forehand to forehand has a really big edge right now over Draper. And I expect that dynamic to play out. And to your point, Joel, about mentally preparing, look, I've been really impressed with Jack's ability to play his best in the biggest matches of his life thus far. First time I ever saw him was against Djokovic in the first round at the All England Club. And Joel, he opened up center court. Like, doesn't that have a feel to it? That has a big feel to it. You're a young British kid who's playing the first match, center court Wimbledon against Djokovic. He won the first set. And then, in Canada, he beat Tsitsipas. At the US Open, he beat Felix. Like, he is not afraid of big matches. However, best of 5, Nadal, there should be an intangible kind of advantage that Nadal has against a young player.
Of course he does.
At Rod Laver
Arena.
Arena.
He does. Defending champ, and Draper, who's playing top 30 tennis. It's like, good. Let's hope this is the last slam. I'm not seeded, and I don't have to enter into what I'll call it the Struff zone of being somewhere between 35 and 50 ranked, and you're never quite seeded, but you're a dangerous floater. So hopefully Draper, because in a way you think it's bad luck for Nadal, it's worse luck for Draper. Draper's a guy who's playing good tennis and wouldn't have minded. Could I not have a seed, please, so I could kind of get a little traction at this first major of the year? But so it goes.
Just from a tactical standpoint, if I were Nadal, I would look to come in because his volley skills are top notch in this field. And he'll be coming up against baseliners that don't know what to do with that. So it would have the effect of shortening points. And it also, because the volley stroke is just more compact, it may not be as tough on the ab. So that would be my strategy against some of these guys.
Last point on Draper is he's playing Auckland this week. It's something to keep an eye on. I don't really think it's awesome. Like, if he were to make the final and win Auckland, I think that's, or even losing the final of Auckland, it's a turnaround. And I think there's an advantage of just being in Melbourne right now.
Yeah, but I know, but again, I think in the face of a player's career, I mean, certainly we'd be concerned about that if it was Nadal and you're looking at Nadal was playing Auckland and then you're getting to Melbourne. But I think for a guy like Draper, it's a great ride through ascent, and it's capped off with a stirring 4-set loss to Nadal on RLA. Good, onward.
Well, yeah, but you don't want to think that way.
No, but I just mean it's like he's young, and this is what you do when you're in that play. You do get on.
Yeah. Can I clarify? Can I clarify what I said? If Draper wins Auckland, that's great for his career.
Yes.
And it's great. I'm saying it might be bad for the Nadal match. So let me be very clear.
If I were Draper, I would, and I think Osaka used to do this, Naomi Osaka. If I were Draper, I would say to everybody around me, don't tell me about the Australian Open draw, and try to shut my ears off while I'm trying to win this tournament, because it would be so easy just to look ahead and say, oh, shoot, I drew Rafa in the first round, and then to just take your eyes off. And he could use the money. He could use the endorsements. Anyone who's able to win a tournament should try to do it, especially in his position.
Yeah, agreed. But there's no way that Draper has been able to avoid.
Osaka used to do it.
Yeah,
she used to like shut off her phone and... Yeah, when there was a Grand Slam, and yeah.
All right. But you would have to shut off your phone. I mean, that would be the
and tell everyone around you. And as Joel said, these people live in a bubble. It's like a traveling carnival.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. You can't go on Instagram. You can't do anything,
right,
or you're going to find out. Okay.
It's even more of it's a bubble now with more input. It used to be even more of a bubble when there weren't as much, phones and social media. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nakashima potentially in the second round. Great backhand, and he also might be top 30.
You're just automatically what about my buddy Mackenzie McDonald, who
Mackie could win. Mackie's an underdog in that match.
He's an underdog in that match, but that's a very stylistically similar kind of match. These are like, again, Novak cut like players with fine backhands and flat strokes. So yeah, I get it. Nakashima's the favorite, but that's okay. So either that versus Nadal, I think Draper's a tougher opponent for Nadal than Nakashima.
Either way, Rafa has a tough draw. I mean, considering these first round matches and then Tiafoe and Medvedev, this is a tough quarter.
Oh, don't forget Khachanov, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Khachanov's lost 22 straight matches against top 10 opponents.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Okay, but I'm talking, yeah. Well, I think also another way also is look at the Rafa. Wow, that's an incredible nugget. Ashnoff would
Yeah.
play Tiafo in the third round, and then you look at the wear and tear of each on the other. Yeah, it's intriguing.
Yeah. All I say that is to say that I think Nadal would much rather see Karen versus Francis in the fourth round.
Francis is playing well.
He is. He is. And then in the bottom eighth, Amy, you've mentioned Medvedev. That needs no introduction. I think the interesting kind of head-to-head thing, and this is the beautiful thing about draws, Medvedev could have Hubie, and Hubie destroys Daniil because of the net rushing. I mean, I feel like my take on Hurkacz is that he is a thoroughly average baseliner and an absolutely phenomenal net player, and it's just about which style he's playing. And when he plays against Medvedev, he plays right. He gets to net. I mean, Hubie
What's
beat
the
him.
head-to-head there, Gil? Do you know?
Yeah, let me pull it up. I know it's favorable for Hurkacz. It'll only take me a moment.
Yeah, because he knows he has no choice. He needs to get his butt to net. I mean, he should do that more. That's the Hubie game. I mean, he's a terrific forward moving player, and that's what makes matchups so intriguing. Medvedev, very interesting.
It's 3-2 Hurkacz, and the two times Medvedev has won, it was a third set tiebreak and 6-4 in the third. Medvedev killed him in Halle on the grass last year. Oh, sorry, Hurkacz. Hurkacz killed him in Halle. Hurkacz won in straight sets in Miami last year. Medvedev was not in a good place during Miami. But then Wimbledon last year, over the course of 2 days, if I remember correctly, Hurkacz beat Medvedev on the grass. So all three matchups are, recent. All five matchups are recent, and it's 3-2 Hurkacz.
Two of the wins on grass.
Yes.
2 of the wins on grass, right, which is very Hurkacz friendly and very Medvedev unfriendly. And I'm not saying this on behalf of Medvedev, it's also just so we know it. So I guess one of the key factors here will be to see how fast this Melbourne Park courts are playing. Because if they're faster, that can aid QB. But that's a fun matchup. I think that's a neat matchup because of the contrast.
What I've heard is the balls are fast. So we'll see
fast.
about the courts, but I've heard the balls are fast.
I'll start texting my contacts in Melbourne and ask about the surface and see how it's playing. I'll have that for our next time.
Excellent.
And to clarify, they've been playing with the Australian Open balls throughout the entire swing, and they were practicing with them. So it's not, you don't need to go to Melbourne to find that out. But yeah, we'll see about the courts.
It's the Dunlop ball, right?
Yes. It's the Dunlop Australian Open ball, which may have been updated for 2023. And I've heard multiple people say this ball's light and quick.
That's been true with the Dunlop ball for a while. I mean, the Dunlop ball I've noticed is I've played with it. I forget if we used it once, Gill, when we played, but
and then we switched to Wilson.
Yeah, the Dunlop ball has a pellet-like quality to it.
It's not fuzzy. It's like a bullet, right?
Yeah, it's not warm and fuzzy.
I like balls like that. I mean, I just played this morning and I was picking balls, which I shouldn't do. And I was noticing like, wow, some of these balls are really fuzzy and some of them are like a pellet. And I prefer those.
That's the big serving Amy talking. It should be mentioned in this conversation, Hubie hasn't been past the third round of a hard court major. So that's going to be a mental hurdle for him. And you also have Shapo in there and you have Korda. The bottom eighth, like we can make a lot of Nadal's difficult first two rounds. And I think a lot should be made of that. And Foe, potentially in the fourth round, who beat him at the US Open. One of the most competitive and exciting eighths in the tournament, I think, is the bottom eighth in Nadal's quarter. And remember, Rafa can only play one of those guys, so it doesn't actually matter that much for Nadal.
Yeah,
but
they'll kill each other.
Exactly. But in general, that's very intriguing to me. I mean, Korda Medvedev, Shapo against Hurkacz, like lots of really interesting head-to-heads.
Agreed. Oh, okay, right. So this would be the potential Nadal quarterfinal. Right. that's an interesting players. Yeah, I'm interested to see how well Korda does. I mean, Korda Medvedev as a possible third round match. That very interesting.
It's going to be fun. Draper, Nadal, fireworks right off the start. Carbias, Baena, Djokovic feels like a match where we're mostly just watching Novak's hamstring, and that's going to be the main focus. And we can't wait to experience those and then talk to you at some point thereafter. That'll do it for this episode of 3. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms. We appreciate it if you leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.